amid the harsh deserts of the Middle East, where the land is filled with rocks, dry winds, and intense sunlight. The people of Israel achieved something that surprised the world. They cut more than 12,000 kilometers of canals through empty desert to form a huge man-made waterway, carrying billions of liters of Mediterranean seawater to support a land that once seemed impossible to live in. But Israel did not stop there. They transformed this seawater into clean drinking water using advanced systems inside large desalination plants. Curious how this almost unbelievable process actually works. For many years, the Negev Desert in southern Israel was considered a lifeless region. Dry, cracked, and nearly impossible to farm. Summer heat often rose above 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Rain appeared for only a short time each year, and underground water supplies became weaker with each generation. Agriculture, the heart of the young country, was close to failing while many families depended on water transported by trucks from faraway places. Yet only a short distance away was the Mediterranean Sea, wide, unending, and filled with salty water. That contrast pushed Israel toward its boldest idea: to pull seawater inland and carry it deep into the desert. The Desert Water Project was officially launched in the year 2000, with funding close to $3 billion. With such determination and goals, Israel did more than turn seawater into usable resources. It confronted the desert and forced rivers to move through sand and heat, before a single drop of water could be guided inland. The first challenge was to turn the hard, empty desert into a space where construction could begin. Using high-resolution satellite images, ground scanning equipment, and thousands of wind readings, teams mapped the moving dunes to find areas stable enough to build on. Survey groups lived in the center of the Negev for months, drilling hundreds of test holes, some deeper than 100 feet, to understand the hidden layers below the sand. Every route marker was placed manually and measured with extreme accuracy. The entire canal path had to avoid wind zones where one strong sandstorm could bury the entire site overnight. Hundreds of bulldozers were sent in to smooth the dunes, cutting down tall ridges and shifting the sand into lower spots. The aim was to form an even surface strong enough to hold heavy equipment without risk. Each area was scraped and leveled under close watch, with teams checking height and angle to keep the surface consistent across long distances. Conveyor belts carried excess sand away, while compacting machines pressed the top layer to create a steady base. After the dunes were flattened, the loose sand still needed support. Engineers learned that adding water to the surface helped the grains stick together, creating a denser and more stable layer. Long sprinkler systems and underground pipes spread measured amounts of groundwater across the site, allowing moisture to sink several inches deep. Once the sand reached the correct moisture level, heavy rollers moved across the area, compressing the surface to remove air pockets and lock the grains in place. The steady sound of steel drums filled the air as each pass turned soft, shifting sand into a firm, flat foundation. When the surface dried under the hot desert sun, it became strong enough to carry cranes, mixers, and supply trucks, forming a reliable base built from sand and water alone. When the preparation was finished, hundreds of excavators and enormous dump trucks began one of the largest digging efforts ever carried out in modern Israel. Every day, about 70,000 tons of sand and soil were taken from a construction corridor stretching nearly 250 miles. More than 1,200 engineers, drivers, and workers operated in shifts, facing daytime heat that often passed 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The canal was shaped in a wide U-form, around 150 feet across at the base and an average depth of 23 feet. To let water flow naturally without pumps, the slope had to stay within 1 inch for every 100 feet. A very strict limit across such distance. Survey teams checked height with laser tools every 160 feet to ensure the canal floor stayed perfectly aligned. Most of the removed sand was reused to build up the sides of the canal, forming embankments that reached heights from 10 to 16 feet. In higher areas, bulldozers cut the layers step by step, while in lower ground, trucks delivered firm fill material until the surface reached the correct level. In zones with weak soil, engineers drilled 16-inch sand piles as deep as 20 to 25 feet, or blended cement and clay to strengthen the base and prevent sinking. The construction zone stretched for hundreds of miles, filled with concrete mixing stations, repair workshops, and camps for field engineers. Under the blazing sun and swirling dust, long lines of trucks and machines moved without pause. A mechanical river shaping the path of a real one through the center of the Negev Desert. This digging stage continued for months. In the Negev Desert, the main difficulty was not only the heat and dryness. It was the sand itself, able to swallow any exposed water within hours. If the canal floor was not sealed correctly, water loss would be severe, which made the lining stage one of the most important parts of the project. First, workers moistened and leveled the canal bed with a 2-inch layer of fine sand. Then concrete slabs about 4 to 5 inches thick were poured in sections measuring 16 feet in length and 10 feet in width, each separated by expansion joints. These joints were filled with hot bitumen to stop leaks and allow natural movement caused by temperature changes. In places with unstable ground, engineers installed an extra HDPE geomembrane under the concrete, secured with steel anchors and covered with a soft sand layer. In total, more than 220 miles of canal were coated with concrete, forming one of the largest waterproof systems ever built in the Middle East. Along the embankments, teams planted vetiver grass and desert acacia to hold the soil in place and reduce drifting sand. Seen from above, the canal looks like a shining silver line across a golden landscape. A concrete path waiting to carry its first life, giving water through the desert. Before continuing, if you're finding this story is fascinating, hit that hype button on the phone's screen to support our channel and help us bring you more incredible stories like this one. A huge canal cannot function as a simple trench. It needs many additional structures to support transport, flood control, and proper water management. At the main inlet, engineers from WAPDA built the head regulator at the Tansa Barrage, where water from the Indus River is guided into the canal through 9 large steel gates. Along the main channel, there are more than 900 different structures, including reinforced concrete bridges, spillways, siphons, drainage culverts, and aqueducts that carry water over natural streams. Whenever the canal meets a road or railway, a new bridge is built to maintain movement. In areas where it passes over natural flows, drainage structures are installed to let the original water pass under the canal. Distribution gates are placed every 6 to 9 miles to manage flow into smaller branches. All parts must work together smoothly because a single failure, whether at a gate or an aqueduct, could leave hundreds of hectares of farmland without water. After more than 15 years of building, the entire canal system finally entered its testing stage. Engineers opened the gates at the Tansa Barrage, allowing water from the Indus River to move through each section, slowly raising discharge from 500 to 2,000 and then 6,000 cusecs. Along the route, teams checked every point, measuring pressure, looking for leaks, watching the canal walls and recording any shifting of the ground. Every issue was fixed before the system was fully opened. When the first wave of water reached the dry, empty canal bed, the regions of Dera Bugti and Jal Magzi burst into celebration. People called it the day the desert returned to life. Wherever the water arrived, cheers followed. It was more than water. It was hope, the achievement of a dream farmers had waited a lifetime to see. The moment living water finally crossed their land, the water flowing through the artificial river was pure and fresh, but its journey from seawater to life-giving resource involved technology that most people never get to see. Let me take you inside one of Israel's massive desalination plants to show you exactly how they perform this modern miracle. The process begins long before water enters the reverse osmosis chambers. Seawater is pumped from deep ocean intakes, specifically positioned to avoid surface contamination and ensure the cleanest possible source water. This raw seawater still carries countless microscopic organisms, fine particles, and dissolved chemicals that could damage the delicate filtration systems. Inside massive pre-treatment facilities, the water first passes through coarse screens that remove large debris like seaweed, plastic, and marine life. Then it enters clarification tanks where chemical coagulants cause fine particles to clump together and settle to the bottom. Oil separation systems remove any petroleum contamination from shipping or industrial sources. But even after this initial cleaning, the water still contains microscopic threats. This is where the fine filtration stage becomes critical. Black hollow fiber membranes, each strand thinner than human hair, act as ultra-fine barriers. These membranes block algae, bacteria, and even the tiniest remaining particles that could clog the heart of the desalination system. The water that emerges from fine filtration looks crystal clear, but it's still completely undrinkable because of its salt content. This is where the real transformation begins. In the reverse osmosis chambers that represent some of the most advanced water treatment technology on Earth, high-pressure pumps generate pressures of 50 to 70 bars, roughly equivalent to the water pressure you'd experience 2,000 feet underwater. Under this immense force, Seawater is pushed against semi-permeable membranes with pores so small that only individual water molecules can pass through. Salt molecules, which are larger than water molecules, are completely blocked and flushed away as concentrated brine. Heavy metals, bacteria, viruses, and virtually every other contaminant are also rejected by these molecular filters. What passes through is H2O in its purest form, cleaner than most natural freshwater sources. But here's something fascinating that most people don't know. The water that emerges from reverse osmosis is actually too pure for human consumption. It's so empty of minerals that drinking it long-term can actually leach essential minerals from your body. The water needs to be remineralized to make it healthy and give it a natural taste. Precise dosing systems add carefully measured amounts of calcium carbonate, magnesium sulfate, and other minerals to restore proper pH balance and create water that tastes clean and refreshing. Final disinfection uses ultraviolet light to destroy any remaining microorganisms, followed by a small amount of chlorine to maintain safety through the distribution network. The entire process is controlled by artificial intelligence systems that monitor thousands of parameters in real time. Sensors check salinity, pressure, flow rates, temperature, and chemical levels continuously. If any parameter moves outside optimal ranges, the system automatically adjusts pumps, valves, and chemical dosing to maintain perfect water quality. Only when every test confirms that the water meets or exceeds international drinking water standards is it approved for release into the Canal system. What started as salty, contaminated seawater has been transformed into pure, life-giving freshwater through a combination of physics, chemistry, and advanced engineering. What do you think is the most impressive part of this engineering feat? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let's discuss which aspect of this water transformation amazes you the most. When the first flow of fresh water crossed the Negev Desert through the completed canal system, everything began to change, not just on the surface but deep within the lives of thousands of families. Land that had cracked under the burning sun for centuries started to show the first signs of life. Farmers who had abandoned their ancestral lands because of drought began returning, driving stakes into ground that their grandparents had been forced to leave. They pitched tents, set up temporary shelters, and began plowing fields for the first time in generations. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was dramatic. Water from the main channel was divided through an intricate network of secondary canals, pressure pipes, and drip irrigation systems that delivered it directly to individual plants. This drip irrigation technology, which Israel had invented decades earlier, ensured that every drop of precious water was used efficiently. Instead of flooding entire fields like traditional irrigation, drip systems deliver water slowly and precisely to plant roots through networks of plastic tubes with tiny holes. This method uses up to 50% less water than conventional irrigation, while actually producing higher crop yields because plants receive exactly the amount of water they need, when they need it. The National Water Carrier Project, which began in 1953 and took over 11 years to complete, could transport up to 72,000 cubic meters of water per hour from the Mediterranean coast all the way down to the southern Negev. That's enough water to fill an Olympic swimming pool every 2 minutes, flowing continuously across hundreds of miles of desert. As the water reached previously barren regions, the changes were visible from space. Satellite images showed long green ribbons winding across the golden desert landscape. Where there had once been only dust and scorching sun, now stood orchards of oranges and dates, vineyards heavy with grapes, fields of wheat and vegetables, and experimental farms testing crops that had never been grown in desert conditions. The economic impact was staggering. Regions that had contributed virtually nothing to Israel's economy suddenly became productive agricultural zones. The Negev, which covers more than half of Israel's land area, was no longer a burden to be endured but a resource to be developed. Villages were rebuilt around the new water sources. Children who had never seen green fields suddenly had schools surrounded by gardens. High-tech agricultural facilities rose from the sand, using computerized systems to optimize growing conditions and maximize yields from every drop of water. But the transformation went far beyond agriculture. The reliable water supply enabled industrial development, population growth, and the establishment of research facilities that would eventually make Israel a global leader in water technology and desert agriculture. Israel's success in conquering the desert created an unexpected phenomenon. They had solved their own water crisis so effectively that they began producing surplus water, transforming from a water-scarce nation into a water-abundant one. This surplus became a tool for diplomacy, innovation, and regional cooperation. Under long-standing agreements, Israel now supplies significant quantities of fresh water to Jordan, helping their neighbor manage its own water challenges. What began as a practical response to geographical limitations evolved into a symbol of cooperation. With water becoming a shared lifeline in one of the world's most water-stressed regions, Israel also provides desalinated water to Palestinian territories in the West Bank and Gaza, creating complex webs of interdependence that highlight how natural resources can connect the destinies of neighboring communities, even amid political tensions. But Israel's most far-reaching influence comes not from the water it supplies directly, but from the technology it has developed and shared with the world. Israeli water technology companies have become global leaders, helping build some of the world's largest desalination facilities in California, designing advanced irrigation networks in India, and advising African nations on sustainable water management. The techniques pioneered in the Negev Desert are now being applied in Australia's outback, California's Central Valley, and the Sahara Desert. Each project represents more than economic value. It's a bridge of knowledge, a way for Israel to share its hard-won experience with communities facing similar challenges around the world. For Israel, a nation that sees scarcity as the engine of innovation, solving the water crisis wasn't an endpoint but a starting point for even more ambitious projects. If the 20th century was about transporting and filtering water, the 21st century is about creating and optimizing it in ways that seemed impossible just decades ago. The next great challenge is decentralization. Desalination plants are massive and centralized. But what about remote desert regions or isolated communities that can't connect to the national grid? Israeli tech startups are pioneering atmospheric water generation, developing devices that can literally harvest humidity from the air and turn it into pure drinking water. These machines, ranging from the size of a home appliance to shipping container scale units, use advanced cooling and condensation processes to pull moisture even from dry desert air with low humidity. It's clean water on demand, requiring no pipes, no massive infrastructure, just the moisture that exists in the atmosphere around us. Meanwhile, agricultural researchers are asking an even more ambitious question. Why must crops drink fresh water when they could be taught to thrive on salt water? Instead of spending massive amounts of energy desalinating water for agriculture, research institutes in the Negev are developing salt-tolerant crops through selective breeding and genetic modification. They're creating tomatoes, melons, and barley that don't just tolerate brackish water, but actually thrive when irrigated with the slightly salty groundwater found in ancient aquifers beneath the desert. This could revolutionize agriculture in coastal regions worldwide, where rising sea levels are making fresh water increasingly scarce. What started as a desperate attempt to bring water to the desert has become something much larger. Israel's artificial river system didn't just change one nation. It changed our understanding of what's possible when human ingenuity refuses to accept the limitations of geography. If this story of turning the impossible into reality inspired you, make sure you're subscribed for more incredible engineering achievements that are reshaping our world. What other seemingly impossible projects would you like to see covered? Share your suggestions in the comments below, and let's explore together how human ingenuity continues to push the boundaries of what we thought was possible.